So, you looking to elk hunt to a ripe old age? Well, I'm here to tell you the ability to do that starts with a commitment right here. Let's go and talk about it. Hi, I'm Bob Terwilliger. I'm 69 years of age, and I'm here to tell you I'm still getting after it in the elk woods. And that's actually a question that I get asked quite a bit within the elk hunting industry is, how am I still doing this stuff? How am I getting out there and putting all these miles on in tough country, putting weight on my back if I need to with packing meat, all that kind of stuff. So that's really what I wanted to get together today to talk about and take you through some of that about what's working for me. There's no magic there, but it does require some commitment on your part, and we'll talk about that. But before we get into the details here about that, I thought I'd take you through a few more details about me and my background for those that don't know me. We'll talk about some of the challenges of elk hunting, in particular as it relates to with aging. I want to talk about some of the things that you need to come to grips with and how those might affect you in the field. And of course, that's the whole key about trying to stay fit, is so that we can continue to be out there and do this stuff at a high level for as long as possible. And then we'll get into the real meat of this video, which are, what is the characteristics of what comprises a good workout for the aging elk hunter? We'll talk about some of my favorite exercises and go through a few of those. And then we'll talk about some of the other variables here, like, a healthy diet, a look at some supplements. We'll discuss one of my favorite topics, which is how alcohol consumption can hurt you particularly as you age and slow you down. I'll talk a little bit about dealing with injuries and those kinds of things. And then we'll wrap this thing up with some closing thoughts. So looking forward to it. Here we go. So let's get into a few more details about me and my background. I've been hunting elk here in Colorado for 31 years, including 17 years of those guiding. That is the last 17 years. I'll tell you that 9 of those years, I guided elk hunts full time. That meant 6 to 7 weeks every fall, getting after it. At my age, I don't guide elk hunts full time anymore, but I still guide a week or two, and then I'm going with my son, taking my son out, calling for him during the archery season. I typically hunt first rifle myself for elk, and then I get out there and hunt mule deer one of the later rifle seasons here. So I'm still getting out there anywhere from 4 to 5 weeks a year just during the hunting season. And I'll tell you, I still guide quite a bit of backcountry fishing. So I am in the backcountry a lot. I'll tell you that I would not be able to do these things at my age, not even close, if I wasn't committed to a healthy lifestyle, and exercise being a key component of that year round. You can't walk away from this stuff when you get older. There's an old saying that says, once you lose it, it's gone, right? I mean, if you don't use it, you lose it. So I'm not a certified trainer, but I have been committed to exercise my whole life. I played a ton of competitive sports as a young guy. And then as I got into my later 20s, I got really serious about weight training. And that really helped me wean myself off competitive sports. Through that process of working out over all these years, I've had some really good people in the gym, both trainers, folks that I know who were really into fitness, that shared a lot of good information and exercise with me. And then last but not least is my son. He's got his degree in high performance sports training and kinesiology, and he certainly has been a key resource for me in helping me mold my workouts with age to adapt to the changes that my body's underwent. Probably the last thing I'll talk about is that in my 17 years of guiding, of course, that I've worked with a lot of clients that have told me about their fitness programs, and they ran, long distance, they did this, they did that. And, so I've got a lot of experience with that too. And I can tell you point blank what works and what doesn't. And we'll get into some of the details of that. But as for example, guys that do a lot of long distance running, that's really not the answer for elk hunting. I'd rather have a guy that does a lot of high intensity or does some high intensity training and combines that with strength training, particularly legs and core. Those are the guys that are going to hold up on an elk hunt in the kind of country we hunt here in the West. Probably the last thing I'll say here about myself is that I get asked, why do you spend so much time in the gym? Seems like you live in the gym unless you're in the backcountry. Well, I'm here to tell you my answer for me is quite simple. I love the outdoors. I love to elk hunt. I want to do it at a high level as long as possible. And in this video, I'm going to take you through some of the things that have worked for me over the years, in the interest of sharing this with you, and hopefully encouraging you, if you're not doing this today, that you do start doing it in the future. So before we jump into the heart of the matter, I thought we'd kind of set the stage here and cover a few more things. Talk a little bit about the challenge of elk hunting, particularly with aging. Those of you that have elk hunted before well understand this, but let's face it, it's a physical test no matter what age you are. And when we're talking about elk hunting, of course, we're talking about covering some significant ground potentially each day. You throw some snow in the mix and it gets even tougher. The altitude is always a variable, particularly for those that don't live here. And even if you do, the first time, for example, you get up to a high altitude, say 10,000 feet or higher, you are going to feel it. During the season, we really don't get much sleep. We're talking maybe 5 to 6 hours a night. And, I think when you factor all these things in, particularly with age, it really amplifies the need that we need to be in the best shape possible for our safety and also to have a good time out there. A few other facts around the subject to come to grips with as it relates to aging and impacts on what we can do in the field. I'll go back to the best fitness you can be in possible is going to make a difference. It's also going to keep you safe out there. A comment for all of us older guys is leave your ego behind. The things you used to do when you were younger, including in the field, they got to come secondary to your safety. In my mind, I hunted a lot on my own, but nowadays I don't go without a partner. Not to say that I'm with somebody all the time, but I've got somebody in the backcountry that knows where I'm going to be or a way to communicate with them. Bottom line, I'm going to suggest that, committing to a year-round fitness program is going to be your best bet to continue to elk hunt to a ripe old age. It's going to enable you to best retain the muscle that you have and flexibility as you move forward with aging. And that's something that we all want to try to do. Okay, let's get into the meat of the matter, which is really the real focus of this video, and talk about what comprises a good workout for the aging elk hunter and a bit why. First of all, I'm going to tell you that the first characteristic, really important, the workout needs to agree with your body and fit within your schedule. If it doesn't fit within your schedule, we all know what happens then. You're not going to be committed. You're not going to do it. Be honest with yourself too. All of us like to work out in a different manner. As an example, I'm a guy that I'm fine working out by myself. In fact, I enjoy it most of the time. But there's others that really enjoy the support of a group or working out with a partner. Do what's best for you to keep you on the right track. You also want to incorporate exercises that agree with your body. Let's face it, we're all built different, and what works for me or works for somebody else may not work for you and cause inflammation in one of your joints or what have you. So pick a different exercise that works that same muscle group and go with it. We all don't need to do the same. The important thing is to get out there and retain and build muscle. If you're new to the whole deal, don't set your goals too high in the beginning. Set realistic goals. Perhaps twice or 3 times a week max for 20 to 30 minutes is all you need to establish the habit and get your body used to exercise. And as you start to build fitness, you can increase intensity and duration and roll with it. Lastly, if you need help, there's plenty of good help out there. Don't be afraid to get help when you need it. Delving down next into what really comprises the key workout components. I'm old school. I'm a firm believer in resistance training. I don't care if you're using bands, free weights, machines, calisthenics, or even perhaps better yet, a combination of all the above. Again, I'm a believer in old school training. There's a lot of fad workouts out there that people, they try them and they don't make it, they don't last. Of course, there's also things like CrossFit can be really good, but I would just caution you guys that are older, because CrossFit certainly, it's pretty intense. There also is risk that some of the trainers I feel in CrossFit maybe don't have the experience, and you could be at risk as an older person where some of those workout routines, you're actually overtraining one muscle group and going to put yourself at risk for getting injured, and we don't need that. Getting down into more of the components. I'm a big believer in a total body workout. Of course, for elk hunting, there's a strong focus on strong legs, strong core. You definitely want to do some upper body work too, so you can carry that backpack on your shoulders. Some form of high intensity cardio, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. We want to really focus our exercises on what I'll call low risk exercises, as opposed to high risk exercises. High risk exercises would be stuff that I would say utilizing a dumbbell. Or utilizing a barbell. I prefer using dumbbells. A lot more freedom with range of motion and less risk, particularly on things like any kind of bench press and shoulder press. Even squats, for an example. As an older person, you're putting that heavy barbell on your back. There's a chance to compress your spine in multiple areas. Overhead squats, any kind of heavy weight, high singles, leave it alone. Throw your ego out the window. We all were younger. We all were stronger at one time. As an example, when I was in my 30s and 40s, I was almost 220 pounds, and I was every bit as lean as I am now. I'm back to my high school weight now, and I can tell you that I can't even lift the weight I used to warm up with, but it doesn't matter. I'm focused on the long haul and trying to retain the muscle that I do have as long as possible and stay healthy. So I've modified my workouts appropriately. In terms of what kind of weight should we be lifting? Well, ideally, I like to see you use weight where you can control the weight, particularly on the negative. So if I'm doing bench presses, I might explode up on the press, but when I'm lowering the dumbbells down, I'm going to go at a slowed, controlled pace. Minimally, the heaviest I'm going to go is perhaps I might go as heavy as a weight that I can do 6 quality reps. Most of the time, though, I'm using weight that I can do 10 to 15 reps, and again, control it at a nice pace. I'm not rushing through it. I'm really getting something out of the negative rep as well. So next question really stems, well, how do I ensure that I'm working hard enough if I'm not using heavier weight? Well, the way that we do that, and this is something you'll see not only us older guys doing, but a lot of times bodybuilders and stuff, or just people that are training for strength and endurance. I like to use a lot of supersets, compound sets, and drop sets, for example. Think of it like circuit training versus powerlifting. For those that may not understand, with the superset, for example, I might do a set of triceps and then go do a set of biceps immediately after, and that would complete one superset. If I'm talking about compound sets, what that would be is if I'm working shoulders, I might do a set of rear delts followed up by a set of side delts or front delts, or all three of them, and that would comprise one set. Realistically, drop sets are going to be where you start at the weight that you're currently working on, you go to exhaustion, you drop the weight maybe 15 to 20 pounds, do another set, and you might do 3 or 4 drop sets to really exhaust the muscle group. Really the benefit of working out in this style is that, or the return that you're going to get is, not only are you going to build endurance, you're going to get your heart rate up, which obviously is important with all of our workouts, and you're going to be working hard. That's going to benefit your strength and your ability to retain muscle. So I want to finish up now with talking about the remainder of what's on my mind as it relates to a good workout for the aging elk hunter. Of course, the goal of this training, from an aging perspective, is to hold on to our strength, maintain, good balance, balance being, the ability to, hike around obstacles in the woods, and also balance in terms of, working, for example, muscle groups equally. If I'm working my quads, I want to make sure that I'm working my hamstrings in conjunction, and really with the interest of maintaining my fitness as long as possible in life so I can keep doing this stuff. One of the other things we really need to think about, particularly for, us guys that are getting on in years, is that we need to allow adequate rest. Rest is really important. It's absolutely critical to preventing injuries. If you overtrain, you're setting yourself up for problems. And as an example of this, for me personally, what I find works really well for me, I work each muscle group hard 1 time a week. So as an example of that, let's talk about shoulders. If I'm working shoulders, not only am I going to work on, for example, pressing exercises that really work my front delts, but I'm going to work on my side delts. I'm going to work on my rear delts to keep my shoulders in balance. I'm going to work on shoulder shrugs. Working on shoulder shrugs is going to help me be able to carry a heavy pack, more comfortably. If I'm talking about legs, I'm going to hit my quads. I'm going to hit my glutes. I'm going to hit my hamstrings. I'm going to hit my calves. All really important to work all aspects of a given muscle group. And for me, like I said, I work that hard 1 day a week. And then before I work that muscle group again, I give myself a week's time to recover from that. Seems to really work well for me. Another really important component, particularly for us aging guys, is, stretching and rolling should be incorporated into our regular routine. Kind of up to you on what you need in terms of how many days a week you should stretch and roll. For me, I like to do it about 3 days a week. Seems to work well for me, and that's both upper body and lower body. Really critical to helping prevent injury. In particular, if we talk about men, we tend to have really tight hips, hamstrings, and IT bands, and stretching and rolling are really going to help keep those things flexible and help us from getting, tightness that can lead to inflammation and even a sore back, for example. Moving on to talking about cardio. Cardio really needs to be low impact. As an example, when I was a younger guy, I loved to run the trails, and that could be a key reason why, I've had both of my hips replaced. I also did a lot of running on the road in my earlier years too. And what I've learned with age is that I don't need to do that stuff. I like HIIT cardio is really the way to go, high intensity, if you will, where you actually raise your heart rate during portions of your cardio, meaning go hard and then back off, kind of coast for a little bit, and try to build your ability to work hard and then recover, because that's going to simulate what you do in the field, when you're getting up in the backcountry, and for example, you got to get up to where the elk are and then get yourself recovered so you can get steady to take a shot. I typically find that hiking is really my favorite. Of course, that's not realistic for all. It's not realistic even for me in the wintertime, unless we have a mild winter. and then we've got to find other things to do. Some people might like to bike. Even a brisk walk can get your heart rate up. If you do use cardio machines, I'm going to suggest to you that don't overdo it on one particular exercise or machine. For example, if I'm riding the stationary bike, I don't want to do that for all 20 or 30 minutes, whatever I do cardio. I like to mix it up. For me personally, I really like the concept rower. I find that really gets my heart rate up, and it works my upper body, my core, and my legs all at once. So I might get on that for 10 minutes and then finish it off with 10 minutes on the stair climber. But whatever works for you and agrees with your body. I think what's key, though, particularly with aging, is don't overdo it on one machine. You're going to want to mix it up so that you're not beating your body up, on just one machine. The next thing around cardio is people are going to ask, well, how often do you need to do? That's kind of a personal thing, For me and the way I train, I took you guys through the way I try to train at a high intensity with using compound sets, supersets, and drop sets and stuff. I get my heart rate up during my normal workout. So for me personally, I find that I can do cardio once a week and get away with it. Maybe if you're looking to burn some unwanted fat and pounds, you might need to do it more often. But that's really going to be up to you. The key is you want to do enough, but not too much, And the last thing I'll talk about as it relates to cardio is for you, those out there that do long distance, steady state cardio, and running is a great example where you just go along and cruise. What I've learned over time is that, that might build some endurance, but it is going to break your body down. I think it also can inhibit your strength, perhaps even lose muscle. So again, the HIIT cardio that I've talked about here is the way that you want to go. And during the year, I'm not necessarily trying to kill it all the time. Realistically, I try to do enough to keep myself in good shape, but my goal really is to get myself where I peak about the time that elk season is coming on. So when elk season comes, I'm really just hitting my peak for overall fitness. And then I'm going to go like heck during the season. And then probably after the season, I need to back off a little bit and allow myself some recovery time, before I start hitting it harder again. So that's kind of my thoughts around what comprises a good workout for the aging elk hunter. And where I'd like to move in next is to talk a little bit more specifics about my routine, the frequency, and, take a look at some of my favorite exercises in the interest of helping you guys. So let's dive a little deeper into my routine that I've touched on so far. In the interest of helping you guys, some of this might work for you. You might have something that's already working and maybe just incorporate pieces of this that you like. Again, it's whatever works. So, again, I work each muscle group one day a week hard. So that says I got a day for chest, I got a day for back, I got a day for legs, I got a day for shoulders, I got a day for arms, and then I got a day for cardio, and then I take one day where I don't do anything. That is just a rest day. And that rest day is really important as we've already talked about, because again, I don't want to overtrain. I don't want to beat myself up to the point where I get myself where I've got inflammation, in my joints or what have you. Within each of those days, for the days that I'm training, I'm going to focus on all areas of that given muscle group. Like I talked about with shoulders, I'm hitting all the different shoulder muscles. When I hit legs, I'm hitting all the different, muscles of my leg. If I talk about chest, I'm working, both flat and incline. Arms, I'm hitting different aspects of arms. I'm hitting biceps, I'm hitting triceps, I'm hitting forearms, and I'm using different exercises, for example, that hit these muscles in a different way. For example, with triceps, I may do push downs, I might do kickbacks, or I might do overhead press. They all focus on the different aspects of your tricep muscle. Again, really important. And I vary those up from week to week too, so I'm not overdoing it with one thing across my different muscle groups. And like I said, one day a week, If you work it hard, for me, that's adequate, particularly at my age. And actually, that's the way a lot of successful bodybuilders train too. So with that as kind of a premise, we're going to jump in and take a look at some of my favorite exercises, not all of them, just some of the things that I really like to do. First, we'll take a look at how I warm up for upper body stuff where I use bands to keep my shoulders healthy, and just some really simple stuff that I do before each upper body workout, particularly around shoulders, arms, and chest, to get my shoulders warmed up for those things. I found that, despite the fact that I have had work done on both shoulders, I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into the injury section, but I found that my shoulders are really good, and I attribute this band work to that. And then we'll get into the real meat and potatoes of, the fitness required for elk hunting. I'll show you guys some of my favorite core exercises and then some of my favorite leg stuff. And, hopefully that will give you a little bit more to go on. So hopefully there's some value in that, taking a look at a few of my favorite exercises. Of course, this is a drop in a bucket compared to what my full workout routine is comprised of and the different exercises I do across the different muscle groups. But if you have questions about some things you might do in your routines that you think I might be able to help with, or looking for some suggestions, feel free to hit me up in the comments. I want to make just a final few comments before we leave this exercise aspect of this video and get on with the final subjects around injury and inflammation, plus some stuff on diet and supplements. As I already mentioned, the warm-up with the bands for my shoulders has been huge. I've had work done on both shoulders. The right one was a ski accident, got hit by an out-of-control skier, torn rotator cuff. And my left one, I'll attribute it more to wear and tear of all the years of playing sports, pitching in high school and college, and playing a ton of fast pitch softball and quarterbacking in football that just had to have some work done on that left shoulder due to wear and tear, shoulder decompression, bicep tendinosis, and a small wear spot in my rotator cuff. But in recovery from both of those shoulder operations and getting my shoulders back healthy again, the band's played an instrumental part. And I think they've gotten me to a point now where both of my shoulders are strong. I have zero issues with my shoulders, and I do the band work religiously to warm up. The belt squats is another game changer for us older guys. You can get the benefits of squats in terms of the leg work, including a little bit of heavier work, without putting that bar, across your shoulders, behind your neck, thereby putting compression on your spine. Not good for us older guys. And the belt squat is a great remedy for that. I rely on that for all of my squatting these days. And I'll tell you, as a young guy, I squatted a ton of weight. As I mentioned earlier, I was a lot bigger guy, and I could squat some real heavy weight. Probably contributed to both my artificial hips. But and that's kind of a lesson for you younger guys, is that when you're younger and you're moving mountains, you kind of have a way of thinking you're getting away with it because you're not dealing with any pain or anything at that point. But lifting that real heavy weight has a way of showing up or later in life, I should say. So that's probably a lesson to be learned for you younger guys. The sled work is awesome. I do that all the time. Not only does it build power, but it's a great way to get your heart rate up if you keep the weight just a touch lighter and try to do it with speed. Backwards is also great for your knees and keeping your knees healthy. So that's one, if you're not doing and you have the ability to do it where you work out, it's a great one to add. Glute raises. I want to talk about those. A lot of times you see the women work on their glutes, but I'm telling you, us guys, it's really important. I learned that with my first hip replacement. I bounced back really quick, but I didn't realize that my glutes were weak. And after about 5 weeks of guiding elk hunts, I started having some knee trouble on that side. And I'm confident it was due to, the front part of my quad making up for weak glutes. So if you want to be able to power up hills and you want to be able to carry heavy loads, glute strength is essential. And probably the last point I want to leave you guys on, in talking about exercise here, that's really, really important with aging. You must make modifications in your workout. And what I mean by that is moving to exercises that are lower risk. If you've got exercises that continually you find yourself having pain or generating inflammation, it's a time to look for something different that exercises that same muscle group. And probably last but not least is, you've got to use less weight. You can't be trying to move that heavy weight anymore. And I don't even do moderate weight. I'll say weight that I can only do 6 reps. I do that on occasion, but I might do that once a month. Most of the time I'm staying at stuff that I can move the weight 10 to 15 reps and controlled quality reps like I talked about earlier, particularly on the negative. So really think about that as you evaluate your routines and your workout. And I feel that if you do that and you make those adjustments as you age, it's going to keep you in the game longer. All right, now let's talk about the thing that none of us like to think about, which is injury, pain, arthritis, that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, with aging, these things are going to surface. Father Time is going to continue to throw hurdles at us, and it's about how we deal with them and the actions that we take that enable us to overcome them. Initially, of course, when you encounter some inflammation, the first thing you can do is back off. Perhaps find a different exercise. That definitely can work. Another thing I highly recommend is that when you work an area where you're having some issues, as soon as you get home from working out, throw a cold ice pack on for 15-20 minutes. It definitely can help. Of course, ibuprofen is an option if you're able to take it. Just don't do it in excess. And last but not least, there's nothing wrong with taking time off if necessary. If it means just from a certain component of your workout or what have you, sometimes that's what you need to do to get over the hump. Clearly, if the pain persists though, or gets worse, don't mess around. Go get help. go to a sports medicine person, get it evaluated. They may take some x-rays, they may even suggest an MRI depending on what you're dealing with. Doesn't always necessarily mean surgery. PT can definitely help with these kinds of things. There are some other options too, like BPC 157 is a peptide that's the rage now in the athletic industry. Not approved by the FDA, but there's plenty of information out there about the fact that it works. I've used it I swear it helped my neck surgery heal faster. I've used it for knee issues and whatnot, where I get on for a couple of months. The injections are more effective than the capsules that you just swallow with water. If you're going to choose to use something like that, though, please don't just take my word for it. Discuss it with your doctor or your sports medicine person and get their input. Chances are they're going to tell you that they don't know enough about it. Enough studies have not been done, but I can tell you there's a lot of people out there doing it with success. There's things like PRP, where they extract your own blood, distill it down to just the platelets and plasma, inject it back into the joint. I've had a lot of success with that with knee arthritis. So it doesn't always mean surgery, but of course, surgery may end up where things are headed in the long haul for us, unfortunately, as our body parts start to wear out. I would encourage you, as opposed to avoiding it, if you really get to a point where that's something that you need to consider, just remember, the longer you let it linger, you lose muscle fast, you lose flexibility fast, you end up compensating in other areas of your body, which can lead to additional injury. So, why none of us like to think about surgery, when it gets to a point that it's affecting your quality of life, it's time to give it serious consideration. And the way that I look at it, with the things that I've been through, when I knew that I just needed to do it, the sooner I get it done, the sooner I get my life back and get back to the things that I love to do. And I can tell you, with the stuff I've been through, I'm 69 now, as I said earlier, I've lost no quality of life. Just do your homework on your doctor, find somebody that's reputable and recommended, and then put the work in with PT and getting back in the gym, and you'll get there, trust me. Probably the last thing I want to talk about, as it relates to workout shoes and hunting boots, as they start to get worn out, replace them. Don't screw around. Don't be cheap. As your shoe starts to break down and isn't doing its job, guess what's taking up the slack? It's your body, and you don't need that. Furthermore, on boots, what I'll tell you is the old style hunting boots, had a really stiff, rigid sole, and for us older guys, that's a recipe for problems, particularly in the knees and the hips, even in the back. We just can't flex those boots the way we did when we were younger, and perhaps heavier and stronger. And again, guess what's taking up the slack? It's your body. So, look for a hunting boot that offers more flex. I can tell you that Crispy is a great source for that. I'm sure there's other ones. And the good news is, with today's technology, you don't need that stiff boot for getting good traction and support and packing heavy loads in the backcountry. The new boot designs are going to do it, and there's no reason not to go that way. The last thing I'll mention too, as it relates to this kind of stuff, is over-the-counter insoles. There's some great products out there. They can give you better support, give you better arch support, give you better cushion. I happen to use one, and I have it in all of my hunting boots, called Protalis, and I swear by these things. I don't get any foot fatigue or anything like that, despite putting miles in the backcountry. So just a few tips there that can help you. Again, with injuries, don't let them linger. You're only going to dig yourself a deeper hole. Go get them fixed, and then put the work in, and I guarantee you'll be happy with the results. All right, we're going to talk about everybody's favorite subject here before we wrap this up, and that's diet. I'll also talk about supplements a bit too. But of course, diet plays a key role in our health, as we all understand. Things like eating balanced meals, avoiding high sugar, bad fats, all that kind of stuff. You guys, I think most of you at least understand that. And that can be really important if you're looking to lose weight. Those are areas you definitely need to cut out. And let's face it, more weight carried on your body frame with age, more wear and tear on your joints, and it's going to be harder for you to get around the elk woods if you're supporting a a bunch of extra pounds. So encourage you that if you need to, really take a closer look at cleaning things up from your diet perspective. Another one that some may not realize is sufficient protein intake is absolutely critical for muscle recovery and muscle retention and growth. As aging men, we do still require a sufficient amount of protein. And you might say, well, what are you talking about? Well, if you take your body weight and you multiply it by 0.6 to 0.8, that's going to tell you approximately how much protein you need to take in for your size. So for example, for me, I'm about 190 pounds these days. If I take in 0.8 grams of protein, that says I need to take in 152 grams of protein a day. That's quite a bit. It's quite a bit, and you need to work at that, to be able to take that in. And we'll talk about that more in a minute with supplements. A few other tips on diet that I'll offer here. Again, for those looking to lose weight, you really want to look at consuming your carbs early in the day. Typically what I mean by that is, for breakfast, so you got a chance to burn them off during the day, perhaps lunch, and then at dinner, maybe you just go with, some kind of protein and vegetable of some sort. If you're going to take in the protein we talked about, really important, you take protein in with every meal. The other thing that protein will do for you is that it's going to keep you feeling full longer so that you're not getting hungry as quickly between meals. I tend to like to eat my meals early in the evening because by the time, it gets to be, say, 5:30 or so, I'm getting hungry, and that's when you can actually fall off the wagon and, dip into a bunch of snacks and stuff, which of course is going to increase your calories for the day. So if you eat 5:30 in the afternoon, it's definitely going to help you, get satisfied so you avoid those temptations of snacking. Probably the last thing I want to talk about, one of my favorite subjects, is food calorie traps. Today's buzzwords with food, particularly snacks, as well as healthy, it's organic, it's this, it's that, and the other thing. Well, that may be true. I'm not challenging that. But the part that I would suggest you take a look at is definitely look at, the amount of sugar that's in these things and also the amount of calories. For example, a lot of the protein bars and snack bars that are out there, they sound really good. They might have really good ingredients. But if they've got 350 to 400 calories in one bar, you could argue that's about the same as a whole meal. So, really need to take a look at those if you're trying to watch your calories. Moving on, talking about supplements, quality protein shakes is really, in my mind, the only way that you're going to be able to take in the amount of protein that you need. If you have protein with 3 meals a day, perhaps you have a protein shake in the middle of the afternoon or after your workout, is a great time to have one. You definitely need to look at that. There's lots of great protein, products on the market. Just pick one that's of quality ingredients. If you're not sure, you can hit me up in the comments again. I'll suggest a few that I use. Probably the other thing I'll say around protein is don't buy the biggest container you can buy at first. Buy a smaller one to start to make sure that what you're drinking is going to agree with your stomach. Some of these definitely can give you a gassy stomach, and sometimes it can be a bit of a challenge to find one that agrees with you. Creatine is another supplement I definitely recommend. There's been a lot of research on it and its ability to retain and build muscle. You don't need to get crazy with this. Take the recommended servings on whatever creatine you're buying. And again, you don't need to spend a lot of money here. Any of the powdered creatine are going to work. Creatine is creatine. I like to mix it with apple juice or something like that and consume it right after my workout. The last supplement I'll talk about here is branched chain amino acids, or is referred to as BCAAs. These are awesome. I like to sip on these during my workouts. It definitely helps with my energy level, and my endurance helps me keep me going. Once again, there's lots of great products out there. The ones that I tend to use are made by Mountain Ops. I'm sure many of you have heard of them. They've got a lot of great supplements, including for when you're in the backcountry. So definitely check out BCAAs. They will make a difference for you. The The last thing I'm going to talk about here is one that maybe some guys will take offense to, but is alcohol consumption. Particularly for you guys that are looking to lose weight, alcohol contains a lot of calories. And worse yet, if you're one of these guys that's into the new fad of these microbrews and stuff, most of those contain double the calories in a normal beer. So you need to really watch those. I'm not saying you shouldn't have one, perhaps two now and then, but that's definitely a place to cut calories. And there's no getting around it that alcohol consumption in an excessive nature will be detrimental to your health and your physical fitness. So what am I talking about here? And you're talking to a guy. I like to have a whiskey, maybe two, a lot of times coming in from an elk hunt when it's cold, just to kind of relax after a long day. Or at home, I might have a glass of wine or whatever, but you really need to know where to draw the limit. And what I've been told time and time again by my doctors, drinking in moderation means if you consume 12 to 14 drinks per week, that's called drinking in moderation, and that would be on the high end. If you're consuming more than that, you really need to take a hard look at what you're doing. I've seen a lot of guys that I've known over the years were really great athletes in tremendous shape. As they get older, the drinking kicks in more, particularly maybe when they retire, and all of a sudden they're putting on all this excess weight, and they can't do the things that they used to do. So this is another area to watch closely, and I urge you to please go on the moderate level here, because if you don't, it's going to show up in your fitness and your ability to get around the elk woods. Well, that covers the things I wanted to talk to you guys about in this video. Really hoping that you not only found it informative, but also perhaps motivational for those that maybe are looking to get started. There's no doubt about it that committing to fitness and also to a healthy lifestyle is going to enable you to elk hunt as long as possible. That's your best chance. And with that, I'd like to leave you with one closing thought, which is outside of your commitment to God and to your family, what else could be more important than committing to fitness for life so you can elk hunt as long as possible? I've made my decision. I think it's obvious. I'm in this for the long haul, and I'm going to run this train till the wheels fall off. I encourage you to do the same. Take care. Get after it. Until next time. See ya.